Hello and welcome to our podcast Wisdom Talks. Today's topic is all about reclaiming your time while avoiding burnout. And we all have been there where we've just been overwhelmed with everything that's going on and trying to fit it in to our ever busy day. So today we've brought Ophelia here, one of our experts, to talk about how you can manage your time better and be more productive and get more out of your day. So I'm going to ask Ophelia a little bit about herself and why you got into this actually and became an expert. If you could share that with the viewers, that'd be great.
Yeah, of course. And thanks for having me, Amanda. So my experience getting into the world of mental health has been a little bit of a long and varied one. I actually started out doing a humanities degree in English and then in film. But during that time as a student, I recognized that a lot of the other students around were really struggling. I had a lot of struggles myself. And so one of the things I was interested in was doing a bit of volunteering for a peer support line. So I got into that for a couple of years. And when I came out of uni, I was thinking, what do I want to do? A lot of the times doing English, people say, oh, are you going to be a teacher then? But that wasn't really the journey I wanted to take. I saw that there was an opening at a digital mental health service, just moderating forums where people could talk about self-harming behaviors, exam stress, anxiety, feelings of overwhelm and burnout, and time management and procrastination. So I got into moderating, and from there I then went on into content creation, doing podcasts, articles. I went on from that into community engagement. So I started going out giving workshops and talks around mental health and how it's just okay to not be okay. From there, I was then promoted to being a senior lead into management. And after a bit of time at the one service, I thought it was ready to maybe spread my wings. Looked around and saw there's an opportunity with Health Assured. So I find myself here as one of the performance managers for one of the counselling teams.
Oh, that's brilliant. And we're so pleased to have you as well, because you've got such a diverse background there of so many people that you've helped. So the topic today is time management. I know that you have so much knowledge of this because of your background and also working with students, because they've got exams to sit, schedules, fitting in social life as well and be a social butterfly. But then there's that overwhelming pressure, isn't there? You've got to succeed. So when we talk about time management, that's what you've learned. I'm going to just say for me, I've got 4 children and 6 grandchildren. I'm pulled to pieces every way. It's one of the areas that I'm getting better at, but I'm not fantastic at. Whereas I've got a friend who's a head teacher and every single minute of her day is planned out. How can we, the people listening and me, get to be, she's called Kate actually, a Kate that is superb at time management, can fit everything into her own day, and she just swans around like it's so easy to do. Whereas I'm like, well, how can we do that? How can people achieve that?
Well, I think we can recognise that just not everyone is a Kate. Yeah. And sometimes we can only do what we can, especially knowing that we all have different lives, different things going on. I think childcare in particular really can take it out of your schedule and just be a lot harder to predict things versus when you might have a bit more of a regimented life. I know for myself, I really struggled at a certain time with time management, especially when I was a student in university. I think that's when I started to learn some strategies that have just gone along with me throughout the rest of my adult life. And one of those for me is planning time for your time management. I know that might sound a bit excessive, but sometimes life is just so busy, so full, you find yourself taken away on the tide that unless you stop and put the brakes on, you're never going to be able to get your ducks in order and sort your time out. So deciding, okay, what is non-essential and non-urgent? Maybe it's a weekday afternoon, maybe it's in the evening before you go to bed, and you just plan, what is my time going to look like? And if you can get that step in first, it's going to make all of the other steps feel just that little bit easier. And some people can have calendars, some people use their phones. I personally like a good old-fashioned paper calendar. If it's something you enjoy, I think I've got cat memes from the internet as my calendar, whatever works for you. But having multiple places where you've got things recorded down. I also have post-it notes. I like to color code in my Google Calendar for work. Having multiple places where you can keep track of things. It's so easy to forget stuff. Our attention is here, there, and everywhere in society these days, especially when it comes to social media, when it comes to trying to find time if you're someone who works, if you're someone who has children, whatever that might be. It's just that distractions everywhere. So you need those reminders to come and prompt you again and bring you back to, yes, I said I was going to sit down and do my taxes today.
Yeah, and we put things off. I think that we do procrastinate. That was a great word at the beginning. We put the bad things off, don't we? But I learned many years ago when I got overwhelmed, and and all these podcasts, actually, one thing that people have been saying is writing things down, journaling. Many years ago, a lady said to me, make a list.
Yeah.
She said, make a list and then prioritize it, number it. This has got to be done today. And she said, it's really satisfying. I always write in pencil, but it's really satisfying to go, done that. And then you've crossed it off, but then I can rub it out, so I recycle the page. But that's what I do. And it makes me feel so satisfied that I've got through that. I'm still not great with time management, but if I get overwhelmed, that's what I would do. So I would say, and if you agree, but making lists is a good way of doing it.
Definitely.
Prioritizing. And when you said about social media, we go, I was saying, wasn't I earlier on, that you go down a wormhole. So you sit there, you think, I've got to do that. I'm ready to do that research. I'm ready to type that, I'll do that presentation or go to that appointment or whatever. But then you'll pick up your phone and go, like Slow Horses at the moment is like a good show. And I'll look at Slow Horses and I'll go, Gary Oldman, when was he born? Then go to his Wikipedia page and they go, who's he married to? Oh, he's got 3 kids. What do they do? And you go down that hole. Do you do that?
I do.
All the time. So how many minutes of your day are spent, just looking at absolute rubbish? And so how would you advise people to sort of not get distracted? Because I'm easily distracted. How do you stop getting distracted? What do you do?
Well, I think, again, it can work differently for different people. Yeah. Some people can spend a little bit of time and then pull themselves away. I think having reminders like alarms on your phone that goes off. There's certain apps you can use as well that tell you when you've hit a certain limit on your screen time with different apps. I think that could be really helpful too. If you're someone like me who recognizes that actually the further I go down those rabbit holes, that just hours, entire evenings can be gone, I've unplugged myself almost entirely. Like, I have a very minimal social media presence just because I've decided, was that the best way I spend my time? Sometimes, but not always. So it's that person figuring out what's right for them, but it is about that moderation, because when it does start tipping over and taking up all your time, you end up not finding a time to wash up or put the laundry away. And when those tasks start to build up, that's when it can then have more of an impact on our mental health. We get stressed, we get overwhelmed, we start feeling that things are hopeless and that we feel helpless, and it can all just start to spiral from there.
When you said wash up, then it's actually even so in some cases it gets so bad it's having a wash, isn't it? Where you get in the energy to because you've not done all that stuff and it's building up. You think, I can't even be bothered now, and it builds up, doesn't it? So it's chipping away at that and finding a motivation to do that, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think even just making things feel a bit more manageable as well. If you decide, like you're saying about having a to-do list that you've put down, I'm going to get the entire housework completed, I'm going to sort out all my finances, and I'm going to have picked up all the kids' school uniform all in one afternoon, then you're probably going to set yourself a little too high with those ambitions, and it's almost setting yourself up for failure at that point. So making those jobs feel manageable, making them achievable. Sometimes for myself with washing up, if I have cups, cup of tea I take to bed with me at night, having the job of just taking it downstairs, not even taking it to the kitchen, just one small step at a time, breaking it down so you feel like you've accomplished something that way.
Well, there'll be people listening and think, I wouldn't, that doesn't happen to me, but so many people it does happen to, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And going, I haven't got the effort to move it or do that. And it's making yourself have that effort and motivation and visualizing what change it's going to make. The one question I was going to ask you, actually, we're talking about lists. would you recommend sort of doing a schedule? So like, hour by hour, what you hope to accomplish in that hour?
You can certainly try that. And I feel like I'm going to repeat a bit of a theme here. Different things work for different people. Some people love that kind of structure and they really thrive off it. But again, some people can find that so impossible that it can actually be a tool that just makes them feel worse about themselves because they didn't manage that. And I think that's where recognizing, for example, ADHD is something where part of the characteristics can be often being late for things, often having something like time blindness, and having that structure might not work for that individual. And instead, it's kind of those times when someone feels hyper-focused and hyper-productive, and that's when they get everything done. And then the rest of the time is just a bit of, open space for time. So whatever that person's life looks like, whatever works for them, I suggest they stick with it. But where you can introduce that bit of structure, play around with it and just see what works for you.
And that would be for somebody, so if somebody did have ADHD or was on the spectrum in some way and they are struggling with time management, and we get a lot of people on the advice line that ask us about that, don't we?
Yeah.
And a lot of employers actually that mention that. There's so many people opening up now and saying, I have ADHD. How differently would they time manage something? So how would their day be different? Is there anything they can do different, or is it just, again, finding what suits for that?
Yeah, well, I think oftentimes people might be on medication for ADHD that can really help in terms of getting that stimulant going and the stimulation. So for the rest of the day, they feel able to do things. I have a friend who has ADHD, and she says that if she doesn't take her meds in the morning, then she will start delaying things, and it'll get to the point of thinking, I need to shower before I can get up and start my day. Yeah. But I haven't had the shower yet, and now I just can't start the rest of the day. And we'll just spend the day in bed feeling a bit paralyzed with things. So that's
what's the point type of attitude.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's managing that, and so for somebody who's taking medication, and I know we are talking about time management, and we do get a lot of questions about ADHD, so it is relevant. But, if having that reminder to take your medication, as soon as you take your medication, get that water to do it, but go and have a shower.
Yeah, and then prompt yourself, get straight into your routine. And that's not for everyone. Some people prefer not to have medication. But again, figuring out what those prompts are, if you can develop little daily rituals. So you feel like, okay, I do point A, I get up to brush my teeth. At point B, I have that shower. Point C, I have my coffee. Point D, I start the day. Yeah. And getting into those routines, but something, again, that's manageable and achievable. Because if it's something that's a bit too difficult for you to accomplish, you find you keep failing to start the day, you need to look at what your routine is and think, what can I do to mix this up and make it work for me?
The other thing is as well, we got this, have you heard of the 5 o'clock club?
No, I don't think
so. The 5 o'clock club is where you get up earlier in the day to achieve more. So what you do is you get up at 5 when the world is quieter. I would say it's quiet. Anywhere you live, Hong Kong, it might not be the quietest place, but, or New York, where the city never stops. But if you get up at 5 o'clock, you achieve more because you allow yourself me time. So you have time before everybody else rises. You sit down, you have your drink, you read whatever you want to read, you have your me time, you make your list, and then you do your exercise that you want to, if you want to introduce exercise into that. It's called the 5 o'clock club. So you get up at 5, you're just giving yourself more hours. But then what happens is later on in the day, obviously you get tired, you're more sleepy later on. But, and I think it does that's a way of reclaiming time, I think. Yeah. Because it's a quieter time for you. Whereas I think you do get swept away when you get home. I certainly do. Where I'll think, well, I'll do the drawers when people have gone to bed. And that makes you more exhausted in the morning and might make you late for work. So I think I'm not suggesting everybody do it, by the way, but it's just one of those techniques that people are using, which is getting up earlier to get more out of the day. And it makes them go into a deeper sleep at night because they've been more productive.
Yeah, and this is where, again, it's no one size fits all, because that sounds terrible to me. I am not a morning person. It's terrible. That's why I don't do it. But equally, if you maybe are someone who's a night owl, finding that time in the evening, say if you do have children after they've gone to bed, an hour before bedtime where you decide, I'm going to do something restful. I'm going to spend half an hour thinking about what's my plan for tomorrow. And then the next half an hour doing things that's going to help your brain wind down and switch off from that. So things like journaling can really help with that. Mindfulness as well. If you're someone who finds you're struggling with time management because there's so many things to do in the day, mindfulness can really help with that because it encourages you to just take a couple of minutes out of your day. And as impossible as it might feel, everyone has a couple of minutes that you can take to just stop, breathe, take in the world around you, give yourself that second to be grounded in your own presence before you start again.
Yeah, time's precious. That's what it is. We only get 24 hours a day. Time's precious. We need to have good quality sleep during that time. We need to also have good quality relationships, good quality family time. Give all to work and have, good relationships, work and enjoy it. And that makes us more productive and it gives us a reward in life, doesn't it? But it's getting that right. And what we give, what percentage to each of them, I think. And it's making sure that we do that. If you are under pressure, so we talk about stress and pressure, two totally different things, but pressure, we've all felt pressure, haven't we? How would you stay calm under pressure? What techniques would you share?
Well, when I was talking about mindfulness just then, grounding is another really important part of that. So in my job, sometimes what it might involve is having difficult conversations at times.
Yeah.
And some tips that I've just taken in for myself that I find really helpful when it comes to grounding and just reconnecting with the environment, that could be things like having both feet on the floor and making sure you have that connection to the earth. And also having your back pressed against the back of your chair as well.
Can you do it?
Yeah, because when you do that, it goes back to that saying, I've got your back. That's relating to the neurochemicals in our brains that help have a bit of a reset when we do that. Breathing as well, when we make sure we take a deep breath. A lot of people like counting. You breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, and you breathe out for 4, and you hold for 4. All these things that can just reset our bodies, that can reset the stress, which has kind of triggered the fight, flight, freeze response, which sends us into this kind of adrenaline mode, which gets our heart racing. And all of those physical symptoms that come with stress can make us ill in the long term. So doing something that can, just physiologically reset us, so important.
It's pressing a button, isn't it?
It is.
So sitting back, got your back. So just making sure you're aware of that, standing up, grounding yourself.
Yeah.
And then the other one is the breathing. So 4 seconds out, and then again, and it just makes you reset, and that helps. That does.
Yeah, and another one I'd suggest as well, say if you're someone who has jewelry or if you've got something like a lanyard with you, having something that you can play with, especially if there's anything sentimental to you. So a badge that reflects your personality, if you have a wedding ring, if you have a necklace that maybe a parent gave you, and that's something you've carried with you. Something that reminds you of yourself outside of that immediate moment, that takes you back and reconnects you to your younger self or your preferred self, and reminding yourself who you are in that moment. That can be a very empowering experience as well. And again, doing something just as simple as playing with that ring.
People do it, don't you?
Exactly. And we can often be unconscious of that, but when we consciously make those gestures, make those acts,
Don't you know?
yeah, and it just can sort of bring you back to yourself, and that can just alleviate the stress just a little bit.
I think you'd have a problem in TGI Fridays because there are loads of bad. She might. It's run on the wall, so I think that's really good techniques. One thing I do is actually, I hold my own hand as well. So if, and it feels like somebody else is holding it.
Yeah.
So another thing I do, my mother passed away. And so I always feel like if I'm going like this, it's like she's going, it's okay, it's fine. And I think there's people don't realize the type of techniques they naturally do that help them with reassurance.
Absolutely. We get into a self-soothing technique.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to hear that about your mum.
Oh, it's life, isn't it? And acceptance. So thank you anyway. self-soothing techniques?
Self-soothing. So again, this is something we can do just in moments of distress. And I think this does tie into time management, because when we notice that we're running late, I know for me in particular, if I'm in traffic and I know that I'm going to be getting to work late or I'm getting home late, that's when the anger can rise, or when you start feeling really out of control. So what you were saying then about with the arm, that's exactly that. It's something that's soothing you. Yeah. Some people find tapping is soothing. Yeah. Some people find doing rhythmic things. So, whether it's kind of tapping on the table, whether it's tapping on yourself, whether it's just kind of stroking the face slightly, whether that's something like playing with your hair, all these different things can just really soothe us in a way that reconnects with some sort of fundamental inner child.
That's what we do as parents, isn't it? When the child hurts themselves, you don't, you go, you rub the bit that's hurting, you say, it's fine. It creates those endorphins, isn't it? It's something, and I'm not an expert or technical terms, but, that it does, doesn't it? It makes them feel better, and they go, oh, yes, it's fine now. But, that I think those techniques are really useful. Is there anything else you'd like to share about time management that I've missed off or we've not covered? Because I know it's the subject. It's the one thing that people struggle with in this very, very busy life that we have, where they can't reclaim, they lose their time, like we say. And I give everybody the time of day. Sometimes that's my problem. I give everybody the time of day. I treat everybody exactly the same. I like to hear what they've got to say. And it's the boundary setting one, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, boundary setting. Yeah. That's a really good one, actually, because our time is finite. Our time is precious, as we were saying earlier, and if you give your time too willingly away to others, you lose that time for yourself. Yeah. And it can even result in a form of self-neglect to an extent, where you wouldn't neglect a loved one in that same way. You would still make sure that they had time for themselves, for their self-care, for even feeding themselves. And if we ever take stock and think, am I doing this for myself? And the kind of exercise we can always do is just ask yourself, if this was a friend, what would I advise them? If this was a friend who is absolutely rushed off their feet, going here, there and everywhere, accommodating lots of other people, giving away their time, what would I suggest they do in that moment? And we can often take that on board from a friend easier than we can from ourselves. But having those boundaries, knowing it's okay to prioritize yourself, to put yourself first. It's the same with the whole idea in the airplane. When the masks drop down, you need to put your oxygen mask on first before you can put it on the person next to you. So always taking that on board, but recognizing as well that it's out of our control. Sometimes there's things like work, overtime. You don't have much choice, that maybe you need to do it for financial reasons, whatever your obligations may be. And if something is really outside of your control, that you can't claim that time back, to just give yourself a bit of kindness of that as well. Because if you can't control it, all you can control is how you feel and how you respond to it. And if you can practice a certain acceptance, then that can just make it feel a little bit easier. Yeah. I'm not saying it's going to make it okay, but it can make it just that bit easier than when we feel angry or resentful or hurt about the situation. And that is a practice. Yeah. That's not something that comes right away.
So it's practice. Practice makes perfect, doesn't it?
Exactly.
So, thank you. I think we have actually spoke about many of the things like distraction. We spoke about reclaiming the time. We spoke about overwhelmed by deadlines, making lists, journaling. There's a message here, and it is that you can solve that time management. You can do something about it. It might not be at first, but over time, you'll get there in the end, won't you? So on these wisdom talks, we always have words of wisdom. Do you have some words of wisdom to share with the people listening to this podcast today?
Well, if things don't work out with your timings, then give yourself a bit of grace with that. It's okay, and just start again tomorrow.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Ophelia. Thank you very much indeed.
Oh, thanks so much, Amanda.